Hey everyone, I am super excited to be here. Joe, thank you so much for the invitation. Ron, thank you so much for getting us connected here. My name's Colette, and I'm here representing Decriminalize Philadelphia. I have a lot of different hats that I wear in my life, as I'm sure a lot of you guys do. So I'll just start by explaining a little bit about me and my history. I grew up inside and right outside of Philadelphia. And I was really lucky to go to Quaker schools. As many of us know, in Pennsylvania, founded by Quakers. We have Paul here actually, who's joined some of our meetings and is also another Quaker individual. But for me, it was the first time really connecting with this concept of this divine connection to God within that we each individually have. This divine connection to what I actually more so consider connection to nature. You know, this nature within that we all fundamentally have, and how we relationally connect with nature that we're living in, and as a psycho-spiritual concept of self, right? Thank you. Yes, exactly. Yes, these are great results. So, I was really blessed to, fundamentally not go into the Philadelphia school system, because unfortunately the Philadelphia school system, as well as the Norristown school system, which were the two districts that I grew up in, are really not very supportive for most people. And this is an unfortunate reality in our country that we don't have these types of supports for our educational system. But when I was a little one, being held in a really great supportive environment, and grew up with this relational aspect of nature in a really interesting way, and a supportive way. And but at the same time, like many of us, if not all of us, had a lot of trauma that we were experiencing on a familial level. My oldest sister, who actually just passed a few months ago, she was very mentally ill growing up, and the dynamics in our family were very complicated. And it's something that had a very supportive environment, but trauma and difficulty as I was growing up. And when I was 15 years old, I was actually a lifelong athlete, and grew up competitively swimming from the age of 5 years old. And I got it in my mind that I wanted to become a wrestler. And so I became a wrestler in high school. I started competitively wrestling on an all-boys team, and had maybe one or two other girls on the team. And I remember having a dream that I would be seriously injured in a competition. And 2 weeks later, I actually tried to get out of competing that day, wrestling, and gave up my weight class to an upperclassman. And one of my coaches convinced me to actually wrestle at the end of the meet. And what happened was I actually broke my neck. I was completely paralyzed from the neck down. I was completely severed my spine. And I had an out-of-body experience where what we could consider crossover, left my body. And what happened in that process was that I had the relational memory of this dream that I had. And so when I kind of went back into my body again, I reconnected on the ground and was paralyzed on the mat. I actually called over my captain of the team to, console me. I'm paralyzed on the mat, having this, and told him, oh my God, I dreamt about this. I could have avoided this. And this unfolded into a very, very interesting process that takes me up into this moment. My father is here with me today, has been following my journey, of course, and my father, and really one of my best friends in life. Both my parents are still alive, and really my best friends. And my father has really this interesting connection to this spaciousness that we experience in this psychedelic space. And when I was recovering, I had less than a 2% chance of ever moving again below my site of injury. And when Riley was speaking about this integration of science and shamanism in so many words, it really, really resonated with that concept. Because I think that we're at this point in time where we don't need to separate out these concepts anymore. These are both really divine concepts of really this fundamental study of nature that we can be using in this way of really stepping into the future to not discredit either one, but to be using them in an integrative and a balanced approach. When I broke my neck, I was fortunate enough, and I'll write a book about this someday, so y'all gotta read the book at some point, all the details. But to summarize, had surgery, got good care. My mom was a nurse and became a lawyer, so she knew how to advocate for me, thank God, because that care helped me get the physical surgery and operations I needed. However, I spent many, many months in the hospital, and what I would do, actually in part with the inspiration of my father, was that I would go into deep states of self-hypnosis and to really be directing energy. I remember, for example, there was a week where I was literally thinking and feeling and trying to hallucinate, right? To hallucinate what the sensation, the connection would be like for me to squeeze my right butt cheek. What would that be like? What are all the different nerves and the tendrils that are making those connections? How does that work? And then, give thanks, I was able to squeeze my right butt cheek by the end of the week. So this was this really amazing process that I went through. And what happened through this process was that we talk about the default mode network, that Riley was speaking to as well, is that through this whole process on a psycho-spiritual level, on a neurological level, this experience opened up a really strong sensitivity for me in how I relate to consciousness and in how I sort of have, let's say, like these extrasensory perceptions. And this is something that's really interesting too about this concept of neurodiversity that perhaps many of you have heard about before or relating to, especially in the concept of psychedelics, and how really our consciousness is expressing itself in individual terms as well as our individual neurological terms, on an individual as well as almost like a collective level in this way we could say. And so this concept of neurodivergence that is coming through in how we can be supporting people with different neurological systems, neurological frameworks of reality, as well as experiences and trauma that we're navigating and also hopefully trying to heal in our lives. So, I went through this process and went through college. I did my undergraduate in international development, and I actually went out into the world afterwards. I lived in Southeast Asia. I worked in Africa, Southeast Asia, working in regenerative agriculture, and got really connected with indigenous people throughout the world, as well as the cannabis space that I worked in for some years in California and in Colorado. And about 11 years ago, I found myself working and living in Central America, and it was my first exposure to ayahuasca shamanism. And it was really funny because, everyone in this room, I'm sure, has heard of ayahuasca. Excuse me. But at that time, nobody really in the global north that I knew, even people who were like me, like plant nerds, regenerative ag people, maybe a little bit hippie-ish, etc., never heard about this tool. And started getting really connected with ayahuasca shamanic cultures. Since that time, I've been working with 3 different lineages that are in Colombia and in Peru. I work with the Yahe lineage that is based in Putumayo, which is the Colombian Amazon. And they have there's over 100 known ayahuasca lineages, and of course there's many, many more. However, they all have their own individual perspective and framework in how they use that tool in a traditional shamanic way. As well as I have my own coaching practice that I've built to help people navigate this integration of the science and shamanic and how they're actually engineering their own neuroplasticity. And what I call it is a self-directed neuroplasticity framework. So bringing all of this back to sort of my experience as a Philadelphian. A few years ago, I saw the tremendous need that we have in the city of Philadelphia for healing and for community integrated support for healing. And different modalities, all of the modalities, we need to have access to all of them. And so what I started doing was getting connected with a national campaign that is called Decriminalize Nature. And there's over 100 different cities right now that are currently working on their own different practices to be able to decriminalize what we call entheogenic tools. So some of you, an individual earlier asked me, what is an entheogen? Great question. So an entheogen is what we, like yoga, like there's so many different ways that we can be accessing that point of consciousness, right? So, an entheogen, what we have defined in our movement, are a series of entheogens that have been used traditionally around the world that have strong ceremonial as well as cultural backing in how they've been utilized, and that they've fundamentally been used for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years before there was actual archaeological evidence of their use, in their respective cultures. So we're talking about psilocybin-containing fungi, and from what we know, there's over 100 different species of psilocybin-containing fungi, right? I'm sure there's many, many more. So to just put that out there for you. I'm almost certain that when you guys are walking in the woods, that you're walking by psilocybin-containing fungi without knowing it. This is how abundant these species are, really. So we're counting this classification of fungal material. And then we're also classifying ayahuasca-containing and analogous plants. So with the cultures that I work with, they work with oftentimes Banisteriopsis caapi or caapi vine, ayahuasca vine, and then in combination with a dimethyltryptophan-containing substance, a DMT-containing substance, right? So it's oftentimes Psychotria vidria, which is also more commonly known as chacruna. So it's these 2 plants that are cooked together and make the ayahuasca brew. However, there are many, many, many ayahuasca analogous plants. I have a space in Philadelphia that's called the Passion Flower House. It's a community organized or associated permaculture inspired apartment building. And we have a native plant called Passiflora incarnata. Everyone, you should write this plant down if you do not know what this is. This is a native plant that is tremendously powerful for supporting depression, anxiety, sleep aid, nerve tonic. It grows prolifically. It grows 40 feet a year. And we have community programs where we're able to get that medicine out into the community. Passiflora incarnata is an ayahuasca analog. If I were to take Passiflora incarnata and cook it with a dimethyltryptophan-containing substance, such as bumbleweed, which lives in the Midwest, I would have a consumable form of dimethyltryptophan that I could drink and have a shamanic experience from. So my point being that these plants are around us everywhere. And when we're framing this reconnection of the psychedelic space, what's happening right now with the so-called psychedelic revolution, I think about this in terms of healthcare and having organized health experiences in that way, where we're having medicalized experiences, and that's incredibly important and vital. And then we also have, the aspect of having legal aspects in the future, which I think is incredibly important and vital, as well as decriminalized aspects, which is where people have the ability to grow, gather, and gift their own medicine, as well as to be able to have what, from my perspective and also my spiritual path in life, which is rooted in ayahuasca shamanism, is to be able to have ceremonial spaces where we can be able to practice this work and this our own spiritual tools in the way that we want to do that. We've written a resolution in the city of Philadelphia piggybacking off of the work from what I call the mothership in Oakland, the Mothership Connection, who has started this movement several years ago, and they are now at the forefront of supporting all of these other cities through their individual decriminalization process. So far, in many cities have gone through this, and it's so interesting because who would have thought Michigan has all of these different cities that are in this process of decriminalizing right now, which is so amazing, as well as Denver, the state of Colorado, of course, Oregon, Oakland, Washington, D.C., Chicago. I could go on, the list goes on. And so this is, from the city of Philadelphia's perspective, for those of you who don't know, Philadelphia is the largest poorest city in the United States. 25% of individuals in the city of Philadelphia make less than $13,000 a year. So hear that again, 25% of individuals that live in Philadelphia make less than $13,000 a year. And why is that? It's because we have really severe systemic racism, lack of investment, living through trauma. We have an incredibly high violent crime rate that has resurged during this COVID period. And really lack of comprehensive mental health as well as integrated supportive community health initiatives in our city. A few weeks ago, I was driving through the Kensington area, which I'm sure many of you know about or may have heard about. But in this area, it is absolutely tragic because it's not just like a concept that we talk about with how severe the opioid addiction is, and of course, opioid addiction problem is nationally. Philadelphia being, of course, the center of the opioid addiction issue that is at tragic epidemic proportions across the country, but where you visibly see innumerable people, hundreds of people living on the street, openly shooting up heroin, living in absolute abject poverty, absolute lack of resources. It's a severe tragedy and a disgrace that this is happening right now in Philadelphia. Happening in this country anywhere. What we do know is that one of the plants that we are asking to decriminalize on our bill is Tabernanthe iboga, which is the iboga plant, or colloquially known as iboga, that comes from Cameroon and Gabon, is native to that part of Central Africa. And this has already been proven, we don't need more research, this has already been proven to be the single most important ally in the cessation of opioid addiction under supportive medical use, as well as supportive community use, where individuals who have a connection to that lineage and that culture are able to use it in an appropriate and safe way. So our resolution is really focusing on these different aspects, and I really recommend all of you here who have shown enough interest to show up in this room to read our resolution, because it actually has a tremendous amount of resources for you to be able to just even look at the citations, check out how we built this. It's from evidence, it's from research, it's from really using the research of traditional cultures that have been using these tools for time immemorial, So I'm going to open up the conversation to all of you, because I could speak at length about any of these things, so to just hear how you guys are feeling and relating to these concepts, and just see if there's any questions. Yeah, please.
Are you already distributing some of these plants in any way to the neighborhood or to community members? What are you doing with this?
So this is an interesting concept, right? This kind of comes back to this aspect of entheogens, right? There's entheogens, I'm sure, growing in your yard right now. We have morning glory. People look at that and, oh my God, look at this invasive weed, it's growing everywhere. What is this? Morning glory is a plant that I work with, actually, a lineage that we could kind of say they're cousins, let's say, right? They're cousins who live up the mountain that are from the Kamsa. I work with the Engano lineage that are part of the Ahe kind of community in Colombia. And there's 5 different shamanic lineage, shamanic tribes. So the Kamsa use morning glory, and they'll take an extract from this plant, and it's very similar to lysergic acid, better well known as the main constituent that's connected to LSD. So this concept of like entheogenic plants, like there's entheogens growing everywhere. However, we've cited these particular plants because of that connection. It is not legal for us to distribute any of these plants right now, which comes to the interesting sort of space that we're in right now of like this concept of, I was talking about it with, I work with a traditional curandero who's also a transpersonal psychotherapist. And he was talking to me about how for our culture here, just even our relational framework, again, kind of what I was speaking to, this framework of nature, how we relate to nature and consciousness, is so different. We have so much more catching up to do compared to First Nations individuals, or even individuals from the global south, from my perspective, who still have this very relational way that we relate to nature, right? So it's like, we have that catching up to do, but so the answer is no. Like we're not distributing these tools. What we do know is that there's a lot of individuals in the city of Philadelphia who are doing that and who are selling these tools, having experiences, having ceremonies, having, trying to figure this out on their own. And this is why we feel like it's that much more important to be able to take this out of being in a stigmatized space and to be able to make community integrated and supportive spaces for people to be able to also remove any of the room for bad actors to come in, for people who are not doing what they should do or what they should be doing, and actually being a supportive facilitator role, which I prefer using that word facilitator as, for me, I really reserve the word shaman for individuals that come from a shamanic lineage and are able to, I've been doing shamanic work for many years, I would never call myself a shaman, right? So having good facilitation roles for having community-supported integrated networks, and that is part of what we're actually having this engagement process with the city. We think that this is very important to do that. Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, when you say engagement process with the city, what's that look like? City government seems unlikely to sit down and talk about this.
No, we're having those conversations now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so this is, the city of Philadelphia is like an island in a sea of the rest of Pennsylvania. Let's leave it at that. So, right, so this is, not only where I'm from, but this is, really, the energy of Philadelphia is very, very different than the rest of the state. So, city council members, we actually had a recent meeting with Derek Green, who was an individual that brought forth cannabis legislation in the city, this past ballot period, he put it in ballot initiative on. And, it's also this concept too of we are opening up the conscious framework of individuals who are having these amazing leading, powerful leadership roles in the city government. And, Derek Green's very familiar with cannabis. However, he's like, wait, okay, what are you talking about? Psychedelics, entheogens, okay, we're talking about mushrooms, so it's even this process of this is what we're talking about, here's some tendrils of information, of connection for you to be able to check this out. Okay, let's come back in, let's check back in again. I fortuitously ran into Larry Krasner on election day in my local coffee shop, and turns out his second in command is an individual that I went to school with growing up. And it's, right now it's this tricky thing where we're really asking for all of you who feel connected to this concept, share this concept with your community, with your friends, especially if you live in Pennsylvania, especially if you live in Philadelphia, because we want to get the word out to really even put this as part of the agenda in this psychedelic revolution, that this is part of social justice, and this is also part of really community accessible healing. I've had the privilege in my life where I've been able to spend a lot of my life out of the country and be able to spend a lot of my life continuously in Latin America studying with traditional shamans. I want to be able to invite my beautiful family and my spiritual practice to be able to come here and be here and come safely here to be able to share with all of you. And they do too, to help with this transition. So it's interesting to see how city government is actually very receptive to this and starting to open up, but we need that energy. So all of you are invited to come and help join us. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm getting a visual here of somebody listening to you and saying, so you want us to legalize drugs. And so I'm wondering, how is the reception